Now let's talk about the best practice for writing a CV using the SSSE framework.
Sounds so cool, right? SSSE framework. I literally just thought of that. I've never really thought about it like that, but it has to be cool and like hooky because it's a YouTube video, right? So I'm like, oh my God, what's this framework, Mike? Okay, so I've been helping clients with their CVs to get interviews and get jobs at some of the world's biggest and most difficult to get into companies since 2013. Now, I'm not saying this to brag, but I am bragging a little bit. What I'm trying to say is that I basically haven't really changed the way that I look at CVs since 2013. So I've used the same methodology for 8 years. It's been tweaked a little bit, but ATSs were becoming a thing in 2013. The other thing is really be mindful when you think about the information or advice that you get, and this is true for any subject, is that person or company getting the results that you want? Anyone can write a CV. You can get a CV template online for free. You can get a CV template on Word. It's easy enough to kind of put the document. But the point is, the document is not any good in and of itself. It's there for a purpose, which is basically, is this a CV that's getting interviews? Is this a CV that's helping me to unlock those doors? If it's not, and if people aren't really talking about that, then I would avoid them personally, because I think you're getting too caught up in the kind of flashy magic and tricks for optimizing the humans and for things to look pretty. And like we already covered, an application tracking system doesn't care if your CV is pretty. I mean, if you look at, there are actually there is a society of resume writers. There's actually an annual competition for resume writing, which is great, but it's mainly focused around the US market, which is different to the UK market. And that's another thing to kind of consider, which is the cultural fit. And we're really specifically talking about the UK. Anyway, enough of my ramblings. So what does SSSE stand for? It stands for styling, structure, skills, and experience. Styling and structure is where we start for all CVs, and it gives us a really good basic foundation. So once we're kind of finished with styling and structure, we should have our kind of base CV, which we can use as a foundation. Skills and experience is what we use to then tailor our CVs to individual job descriptions. So we can kind of think about this as two kind of discrete elements or separate things to think about, because once styling and structure is done, we don't really need to do it again. But we will sort of come back and do little tweaks and changes every so often with skills and experience. So number one, let's talk about styling. So styling means, what does your CV look like and how long it should be? And the key idea to sort of think about it is that if an ATS can't read your CV, it's not going to include it in its kind of ranking or reporting system to the person who is looking at the end result. And this is really important. It basically means we want our CV to be as readable as possible and as close to plain text as possible. Like we've already said, we want to optimize for the ATS first and for a human second. And generally what people do is the other way around. They optimize for the human and the human eye, and it's just, well, look, unless a person is going to look at it, i.e. I'm going to hand it to you, I'm going to physically send it to you in an envelope, then probably an ATS is going to look at that. So here are some things to think about. Your CV should be no more than 2 pages long. Some, for example, investment banks, some industries want it to be a page. It is a little bit difficult to do at times and does really involve you being quite savage in terms of your editing. One thing I wouldn't advise you to do is just to shrink the font. I see this a lot, like people shrink it to like an 8 point. So you've optimized for the ATS, but when a human sees it, it just kind of goes like this. If they're anything like me, if I can't read it, it just goes in the bin. Why? Because I'm busy. I've got other things that I need to do. Now that we know an ATS is going to look at it, it kind of gets rid of a lot of stuff. So it doesn't care about headers, footers, photos, fancy doodly bits and all that kind of stuff. And all these different sort of things that I do see on CVs, because the ATS doesn't care. It's just passing for keywords. It's just passing for text. We don't need pictures, and also our content should be in chronological order. This is something that it's more of a structure thing, but I just wanted to throw it in there anyway. So we want to think about your most recent thing first, and then kind of go down through that in chronological order.
Here's the example CV from the free download that you can grab in the description below. It's not pretty, but you'll notice that the format is easy to read and follow, both by an ATS and a human eye. Much of the styling is more about spacing and the tactical use of bolding and bullet points.
So 4 more detailed ideas to think about are, and this is really kind of just thinking about the ATS even more, try to use one font if you can, and try to not use too many text sizes. So we're going to look about it in the tool afterwards. Sometimes when it's kind of passing for optical character recognition, it can sort of mess things up. So we're just sort of saying like one font size for the heading, for subheadings, and then for the text afterwards. Don't use columns. They don't like columns. I don't like columns. So this is something that I always say to clients, don't use columns. It kind of looks all right, and it might be fine on a website, but it's not cool. ATSs don't like it. Try and use simple bullet points. I don't see this so often, but often candidates want to differentiate themselves by being a little bit fancy and kind of like, look, my bullet points are ostriches, and it's just like, what the fuck? I mean, number one, why do I care? Number two, if an ATS can't pass it, it might discount it, and that might affect sort of how it interprets the rest of that line. Just simple dot dash will do. Also, kind of across the board, don't use graphics. What I mean by this is sort of a graphical representation of your skills. This is a really common one. Like, I see this a lot with designers, and don't get me wrong, some of these CVs are beautiful and a lot of hard work has gone into it, but who's going to look at it? If it's an ATS, they don't care, right? If it's a human, so it'll have something different. Maybe if I'm sending something over LinkedIn to a human, I'd be like, here's my human CV. And then with the graphics, you want to think all of that stuff the ATS is just going to discount. It's just going to ignore it. So not only, you know, are you missing out on the fact the ATS has ignored it, that works kind of for nothing. So don't have graphics, full stop. Next, let's talk about structure. So structure means how the information is going to be laid out on the page. You could also think of this as formatting. There are 5 things to think about: personal information, education, work experience, extracurricular activities, which I basically classify as everything that isn't work experience or education, and then finally skills and interests. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go back to the example, which you can download in the description below, and we're going to have a sexy slideshow so that I can really point out the individual things that we want to be looking out for as we kind of format this stuff, because I find if you break it down by chunks, it's much easier to understand and is more manageable.
So let's check out our CV structure in another sexy slideshow. I know you're saying like, I can't believe it, so many slideshows. I'm so lucky. So what I want to do is basically take you through the individual parts of that example CV we've referred to a couple of times. What I find really useful is when people point stuff out to me and make it hyper visual with arrows, because then I can really understand and kind of get into the meat of it. So first of all, in personal details, you've got the name and also the nickname up the top. I realise that this is a little bit controversial. What I often say to clients, say for example they've got a name that I know people might find difficult to pronounce, I just say, look, if it's going to make the slightest bit of difference, there's a difference between you saying that's not right and I agree, because I have a difficult sounding second name, Mutia, which people always butcher. But I just say, look, if I can just kind of get past somebody just because I've got a nickname like Steve, then fine, right? And we can argue that all we like, but the point is that's kind of the reality. I can't prove that, but I think it just might make the 1% difference. Then we've got mobile number, a sensible email, and also just town and postcode. Don't put your full address on your CV. Some people also put their date of birth, and you've pretty much almost given me everything I need to steal your identity. Next, we're talking about education. So we want the dates, the university, the subject, and really importantly, the grade. I don't know how many times I've looked at candidate CVs and they've just missed off the grade. And if you're applying for a big job at a big firm, a lot of them require a particular grade, probably a 2-1 at bachelor's. So you need to have that on there because the ATS is going to pass for that. We would also include relevant modules. Now, some people include no modules, or they'll explain their dissertation. It's not really necessary. Again, we're just thinking about what are they looking for. So if we're applying for a finance role, then we're going to try and mention stuff that's financy, like financial mathematics, that kind of thing. You might have a standard list. You don't have to provide the whole list. I mean, if you have the space, then fine. But again, think about optimizing for the ATS and not the human. Next, talking about work experience, so the dates, the company, do put the position on there. Very often someone will just put like intern or kind of summer internship, something like that, but it's not really specific. And a lot of the ATSs, they will pass and look out for bolding and also something that they believe is presented as a job title and a company. So if you're applying, say for example, to be a accounts assistant and you've previously had a role as an intern and you were an accounts assistant or accounts assistant intern, put it in there, because they're going to pick that up and go, well, this guy was an accounts assistant before. Then we have the experience, and crucially, I love putting in key skills. This is, for me, has always been a game changer for all of our client CVs, because you can amend this so quickly and easily. You can amend the experience to suit the roles as and when is necessary. Not like I worked at McDonald's and I also, I don't know, did something to do with corporate finance. It's got to be realistic if a human looks at it. But this, with the key skills, makes it really easy to edit and match the skills in the job description. Same again for the extracurricular activities, whether that be volunteering, clubs, societies, and you can also get skills out of this here. This is really important if you don't have work experience. And also thinking about the work experience before, you don't have to have work experience at the same. Just say I've developed a particular set of skills. And then finally, I like to have a little bit at the end, which is skills and interests, because people don't really know where to put this. They can put this everywhere. The only way that I would change it is that if you're doing something that's super technical, like for example a software engineer, I'd put your skills first. I'd even put it above your education, because I think that's kind of what they're looking for, right? You know, if I'm looking for a mechanic, I want you to know that you're a mechanic that specializes in Hondas, because my car's a Honda. So I'm really going to be looking for Honda first and then mechanics, that kind of thing. So when you lay out the languages, make sure you say to what level that you're at. Just as a guideline, you want to be business fluent and above. If you're not business fluent, don't put the language on the CV. I've had a couple of candidates interview for roles or been invited to interview and they don't speak the language. I can remember I had a candidate, a client who had a terrible experience. He had to involve for a management consultant in German, and his German was not great and he really didn't enjoy it. Plus it's, you know, you might say, oh, you know, I want to try, but they're going to test your language. So you need to be confident enough to have a conversation in it. Same for the coding languages. Try and put it in a way to sort of say, I realise there's a little mistake there next to MATLAB. So try and put it in a way that helps the other person understand how good are you. Like, are you beginner, intermediate? They're generally looking, if it's a graduate role, you can have some more, but try and keep the list short. Sometimes when I've actually, in another role, when we were hiring for developers, I'd see a lot of developers, software, front and back end developers, software engineers, who would kind of list out, students would list out kind of 10 different or 15 different coding languages. They didn't know that many languages. Right, and then interest is just something a little bit about you.
Okay, so now we've got our styling and structure sorted, we want to talk about skills and experience. Now remember what we said, the styling and structure kind of gives us our baseline, our foundational CV, so we can keep coming back to this whenever we like, and then using the skills and experience from a job description, we can start to tweak that description to make sure that we're matching those two things together. And what I want to do with you is actually take you through a job description and show you how we would do this. Now, the job description that I'm going to show you shortly in a screen share and then go through and pick out some skills and experience and walk through this with you can actually be found in our Skillshare course, which is called Cover Letters That Get Interviews. So if you want to download that particular handout, then just go down into the description below. I think underneath the timestamp there's all blurbs and there's all like, look at all my stuff. And then you can, in there you'll see the free Cover Letters That Get Interviews course. So we're going to be using a job description for a real estate debt strategy analyst for Blackstone. I know, right? So the short story is super competitive position for a top investment bank. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use that job description to create a CV which tells their ATS that we're a great match for the job. I cannot stress to you how important job descriptions are, and almost all candidates just completely ignore them. And it's easy enough to do because basically you get jaded. You just think, oh my God, I'm having to do this again, and click again and apply again. And the fact is, you want to really think about concentrating on quality over quantity. So time and time again, what we find of our clients is that actually they don't apply for loads of jobs, but we do spend a lot of time thinking about those applications and what we want to say and getting them matched so that they're going to move on to the interview. And really the basic idea is pretty simple. Read the job description, select some keywords, sprinkle them in the CV, and then test it out.
So this job is quite competitive, probably well above the UK graduate average for applications per role. So it's actually lower than people think. It's about 20 to 1. I would say this role, because it's pretty specialised. It's a real estate debt strategies analyst. It's quite a specialised role in an investment bank. Plus it's Blackstone, which is a top tier investment bank as well. So this would probably be closer to 50 to or 100 to 1. Which means for every job there might be 50 to 100 applications, but of course we can't know precisely. I'm just guessing. There's no science involved. So what we're most interested in is the job description, responsibilities and qualifications. So see here, like they give the blurb, this is why Blackstone's awesome, this is why their real estate business is awesome. I think it's pretty awesome, to be fair. Then we've got the job description and the responsibilities. So I've highlighted these because you can kind of get lost. I like to copy and paste the job description and put it in a Word because it gets rid of all the formatting and the nice pictures, and there's kind of like some smiling young person going, I can't believe I joined this company, it's amazing. It's just distracting. I'm not saying that they're lying, but they're probably lying. So the responsibilities day to day, specific responsibilities, and also their qualifications. Now I understand that not every job is like that. Blackstone's job description is really good in terms of they've been really clear about what they want. You look somewhere else, like you might look at a Barclays, for example, their job description is not particularly helpful. Essentials are okay, but you sort of have to dig in. But so sometimes you might have to decode, and sort of what I like to do is I'll copy and paste the whole thing, and then I delete everything that's not useful, and that's really handy. So instead of trying to pick stuff out, I just delete all of this bump and be like, oh, this isn't important. So basically what we'll do is that Blackstone are essentially telling us what they want. They say, we want somebody whose work, so our analysts, their work will include this. So they'd quite like it if you've done something like that before. Same for this. And also they're asking for these skills. And notice these skills are reasonably vague. I don't think there's anything massively technical here. Not highly recent, because it's unlikely a graduate will have worked on legacy loans, for example. And then what we do is the more kind of skills and experiences we can pick out, the more likely we're going to kind of match the pattern. Now, we don't know if this is the only thing. We can't sort of predict the algorithm. And I'm not saying that there's a magic formula, but I just tend to pick out a couple of things and put them in the CV if it's true. That is really important. So don't just lie. Take things that you can actually say, oh yeah, I kind of did that, but I've explained it in a different way. So again, back to a sexy slideshow. So I wanted to show you how we could kind of represent this. So all we've done is we've ripped out the skills and experience from the Blackstone job description. And you can see on the experience, there's 10 different things. New loan originations, restructurings, recapitalization market. I don't really understand what all this stuff means. Some stuff, right? And then the same for the skills. So we've got 9 skills and we've got 10 items of experience. Then we can just pick and choose what we can basically put in our CV, what we can get away with. And also don't forget what is true. The reason why I wanted to show you this in a real example is this. Basically, this is the skills and experience part of the SSSE. We just want to repeat this process for every job you apply to. Now, bearing in mind, say for example, you really want to be a real estate debt strategies analyst. If you are, holla, and just throw us a comment. Just be like, he's talking about me, yo. What I mean is, the same job role are kind of going to have the same skills, but it's always useful to look at the job description. Is it time consuming? Yeah, but it's less time consuming than you sitting there for 10 hours applying for jobs and just getting rejected because your CV just isn't a match for the job description. And trust me, it's better to do a few applications well than 100 applications badly, because you're only looking for one result. That's the thing. We're trying to optimize for success, and it is a winner takes all game. You only need to be successful once. So I really kind of plead with you and thinking about those 4 CV principles, optimizing for the ATS, and that there is no perfect CV, making sure that your CV is, matching those experiences and skills.